Yahoo Finance Presents. I'm Rick Newman. Joining us for a repeat visit is Governor Jared Polis of Colorado, the Democratic governor. He's in Boulder. Governor Polis, great to see you.
Hey, Rick, great to be back on the show.
I want to ask you first about COVID. The funding bill that Congress recently passed, President Biden wanted an extra $16 billion for COVID aid, testing, vaccines, things like that. He didn't get it. That money was not in the bill. President Biden says that's a big hole because states and cities need this money for the next pandemic or for another surge. What is the situation in Colorado? Do you need that extra money?
Well, look, I think considering the costs of any disruptions to the economy, which go well above and beyond $6 billion, the federal government absolutely should be ready. What does that mean? We should be ready with enough doses for a fourth vaccine if needed. We should be ready to do drive-through testing again at a large scale if needed, distributing of therapeutics that are highly effective against COVID if needed. So it's almost like an insurance fund. We're all, with our wishful thinking hats on, hoping this thing doesn't come back, but we are seeing increases in Europe. You never know what a new variant will bring. Frankly, I'd say $6 billion is a small amount of insurance to be ready to prevent further disruptions from our economy that could cost tens or hundreds of billions of dollars.
So there was this inside the Beltway argument about where that $16 billion should come from. Should it be repurposed for money that Congress has already put out there, or should it be new funding? What's your view on where that money should come from, if it ever does come?
Well, I don't really, as you know, I was a member of Congress for 10 years. I would have been more involved. Now, as a governor, I don't care as much where it comes from, that the federal government is ready with again, fourth doses if needed, therapeutics, the ability to turn on drive-through testing if needed. These are all contingencies. I certainly would be fine upon it being contingent funding that they don't spend unless they need to. But absolutely, it should be authorized and ready to go. Because the cost of not being ready, and you think we would have know this now because we've experienced it a couple of times, are far higher than that.
So tell us about the economy in Colorado. We've got terrific job growth in most parts of the country, but we also have 7.9% inflation, which is really bumming out consumers and a lot of business owners. What's the situation like in Colorado?
Our economy is doing very strong. We have most of our sectors are fully recovered, even above and beyond the 2019 baseline, about 4.1% unemployment. Our cost of gas is less here than the national average. That doesn't mean it's not a pain point. It absolutely is. I've called for a suspension of the federal gas tax. We're trying to provide additional relief from state gas fees, but our economy is doing very well. And we're really focused on housing affordability, workforce readiness and training to make sure we can help people upskill and reskill and deploy their talents, earn even more, and fill important gaps that help our businesses succeed.
Colorado produces some oil. It's not Texas exactly, but you have some oil producers there. Do you know if they are producing more oil with prices as high as they are, or if they are planning to? Are you having any conversations with those producers?
We're the 7th largest producing state, so it's a significant part of our economy. I have had several informal discussions, and many of them tell me they're not planning on changing their plans. What they need for that is a couple things, Rick. One is long-term price stability, because their decisions today are not based on where oil is today. And in fact, oil is 20% off its peak from a month ago, a week ago. It's based on where it will be when that oil hits the market. It could be in 6 months, it could be in a year. So that's what they're following. The second is, frankly, the capital markets. And as you know, there was a bubble of debt that drove oil and gas production a couple of years ago. They're still on the other side of the pendulum. They had a lot of bankruptcies, a lot of it worked through, assets have been sold, and now they're managing more tightly for dividends, for profits, for share buybacks, for cash. They're not interested in debt financed expansion. So that's what I'm hearing informally from producers that are active in Colorado and other states.
Well, with gas prices well over $4 a gallon, at least for the time being, drivers want the government to do something. I mean, the government can't set prices, obviously, here in the United States. Based on your conversations with these companies, is there anything at all the government, whether it's state government or the federal government, can do to help production, whether it's with regard to permitting or leases or anything along these lines?
So as an example, in our state, they have 2,600 pending permits that they could drill tomorrow if they if they had the capital and equipment to do it. So it's not really a question of permitting. Obviously, that's a long and even perhaps medium-term issue. But if we're talking about short-term prices over the next year, no, it's not about permitting. It's about deployment of capital. And I don't know a lot of what government can do. I mean, you hear some Republicans that are almost echoing socialist party lines saying we should order them to do it or make them do it, sort of a centralized, command economy. But no, the free market is not significantly leading to significant increases in production. Look, if prices stay where they are now, there's no question domestic production will step up. But I think what a lot of producers want to see is this just a spike in the market, or is this something that we can count on by the time we get rigs in the ground, 6 months, a year from now, based on decisions on pricing and where we are today?
Just to be clear, those 2,300 permits you referred to, those are permits that are in the clear now, and they don't require further steps. There's nothing else the government has to do for those drillers to be able to act on those.
Almost all of them have no additional steps. They're ready to go. There might be some on federal land in Western Colorado that might be subject to pauses or additional federal zoning restrictions. But I'm comfortable in saying there's at least a couple thousand sites that are ready to go if they have the with just the capital, the desire, the equipment. They're ready to be deployed.
So let me ask you a little bit more about inflation. This is obviously a problem for Democrats who have very thin majorities in the House of Representatives, where you used to work, and also in the Senate. You've seen the forecasters saying Democrats could lose both houses. Inflation could be a big contributor to that. What are your thoughts about what the Democratic Party should be doing and also saying about 7.9% inflation?
First of all, we should show empathy with the struggles that Americans are facing with increased prices and say, let's do everything we can to cut costs. And that includes reducing fees. It includes things from the left and the right, right? Obviously, absolutely, Democrats should always be comfortable, and even more so now, talking about daycare and preschool, reducing healthcare costs through insurance reforms and pharmaceutical reforms. But it also means reducing fees where we can. Here in the state, for instance, we reduced the cost of our annual state park pass in Colorado from $84 to $29. Why don't we reduce the access fee for our national parks, right? Why don't we make passport renewal free? When you look at how people interact with and pay the federal government, how can we reduce those costs and fees? Certainly eliminate the gas tax for a year. There's a bill by Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona, to do just that. 18 cents a gallon would save consumers right away, and let's provide that relief to people. So those are the kinds of things we should be looking at.
Well, as somebody who used to work in Washington, tell us what you think about what Congress is actually doing. So you mentioned a bill that has been proposed, but in terms of the Democratic agenda, I mean, we know there was this huge social welfare and green energy agenda, the Build Back Better plan, which has now been rebranded as, I think it's Build America Back Better. This has gone nowhere, and it almost seems as if Democrats, because they've been trying to do so many big things that are so hard to do, they end up having a hard time doing even small things. Are you asking Democrats in Washington, how about 10 small things we can point to as at least we're trying here?
I'd say reducing costs and fees and taxes is a big thing, right? And let's do that every way we can. Let's reduce healthcare costs. Let's reduce daycare, preschool costs. Let's cut fees and provide holidays on different taxes. Look, here, the American people, largely, we have good employment figures. Many people have jobs. Many people might have gotten a 3% raise, but what does that mean if your costs go up 7, 8%? Right? If your rent goes up that much, if your groceries go up that much, you're less well off. So let's provide some relief on that. And I think that's the biggest issue right now is how we can save people money. It's what we're laser focused on in Colorado. And of course, we appreciate any and all help from Congress and the federal government.
We're talking about inflation here, but outside of inflation, is there anything you would like to see the Democratic Party doing, and especially those Democrats running for re-election in Congress, to improve their odds of keeping control of Congress? Anything you want to see them do that they're not necessarily doing?
Well, look, I think it's about just real life solutions to real life problems. Now, look at dissecting something like inflation. I don't think it's productive to talk about and especially expound on the different sources of it. The pandemic, the war in Ukraine and gas prices, supply chain interruptions, fine. To your average person, they get monetary policy, right? Which who knows all the things that contributed to it? Government spending, there's a lot of things. But rather than talk about what's causing it, let's do what we can to reduce prices and save people money right now, right? How do we reduce fees? Cut taxes where we can, suspend different, gas taxes, and how do we say, look, we get it, costs are going up. At least for the part that you interact with us, we're going to make sure that you can hold on to more of your hard-earned money.
Just one last question about the economy in Colorado. Some economists are starting to warn they're seeing signs that a recession could be coming, not imminent. That's not anybody's baseline forecast, but are there any things in Colorado that worry you about a possible recession?
So far, we're seeing strong signs of growth, Rick. Again, our unemployment, most industries recovered above and beyond where they were in 2019, including outdoor tourism and recreation. For our outdoor tourism and recreation industry, frankly, we just are more concerned with the snow to make sure our world-class resorts are able to stay open into the spring than anything else. And so far, we have good snowpack this year, and we welcome everybody to experience the great outdoors in Colorado.
You've said you want Colorado to be the first digital state. You're a fan of cryptocurrencies and different ways of adopting it. What do you mean by that, making Colorado the first digital state?
Well, we're a very innovative, tech-forward state. So what we announced a few weeks ago is that we're going to be the first state to accept cryptocurrency payments for state taxes. We're soon rolling that out to other state fees. It won't be too long before renewing your driver's license, all of those other hunting passes, fishing passes, you'll be able to do it in crypto. We're not holding the crypto, to be clear. We're just going to add a transactional layer for the convenience of our constituents and people that want to use alternative forms of currency to engage in commerce with the state of Colorado.
So you haven't enacted that yet, or people are not doing it yet. Do you have any sense of what the uptake rate is likely to be?
Yeah, we plan to have it by the end of summer, technology enabled. I suspect it'll be upwards of 1%, Rick, of the transactions. We'll see. Wouldn't shock me if it was 0.25% to 1%. I think it'll likely be in that range. I'd be surprised if it started out much higher. And it's a basic convenience thing, right? We want to be, and we're also looking at implementing, I think the first state in the country with a chief blockchain architect for our state. And we're looking at blockchain solutions across several core personal information and public-private functions as well.
Just to get into the weeds a little bit on how a state government would accept cryptocurrency, since the value of cryptos is so volatile, how do you manage that volatility and make sure you're actually getting the tax payments that are appropriate rather than one that might be wildly too high or wildly too low based on the value of crypto, or also to make sure people don't game the system and paying crypto when the value seems to be distorted by some amount? Is that easy to put in place or not so easy?
Yeah, it's frankly not as exciting as it sounds like, because our state budgets and operates with dollars. Everything is converted to dollars. So it's very simply a payment layer, not too different than a credit card payment layer, but with thankfully significantly reduced transactional costs, where effectively the state will only log and put on the books the dollars. They'll be converted in real time, and people will be given the credit for the exchange rate at that moment that the transaction's engaged in.
Let me just go back to one thing you mentioned before, which is the ski industry and the outdoor sports industry. In the winter in particular, many people in this business are very concerned that global warming is going to make it harder for these businesses to operate. There's just going to be less snow in ski country. Is that something that is actually happening so far in Colorado, or just a theoretical concern?
Yeah, two of our major industries in our state are climate related. Our agriculture industry, over $1 billion in exports, farming and ranching, as well as our ski industry. And yes, during much of my tenure as governor, we've been under a statewide drought. We're engaged with additional water conservation projects. All of our major producers on the ag side, as well as resort areas, are preparing for the ramifications of climate change, which is one of the reasons that Colorado is leading the way in the transition to electric vehicles. And we're going to have an 80% renewable energy grid within just 8 more years by the year 2030.
You think the industry is affected by this so far?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely affected things already. We've seen some of our higher altitude resorts are better situated. There's areas that were marginal, lower altitude ski areas that no longer have the coverage to be able to be sufficient. But the effects are complex. It also in certain areas can lead to more precipitation. But I think that we have a lot of technology, including snowmaking, that have allowed for extended ski seasons and many of our world-class resorts as well.
Governor Jared Polis of Colorado, always great talking with you. Thank you for your time, and hopefully we'll bump into you on the slope someday.
We'll look forward to it, Rick. Take care.
Bye.